Welcome, Patreon contributors, to Spoiler Talk for the book The Girl Before. Hopefully, you've listened to our conventional episode where we review the book and everything, and now you're just listening in because either A, you've already read the book and you want to see what we thought about the stuff we couldn't spoil, or B, maybe you don't feel like you're going to read the book based on our review and you're like, well, I just want to hear the dirty stuff anyway.
All right, so I had a terrible joke, and I don't even know if I want it on Patreon.
I can't. You must.
All right, so the last thing I said before we went to this was, if 50 Shades of Grey and Before I Go to Sleep had a baby, it would be this baby.
Yeah.
Unless Jane was carrying it.
Ooh. I'm gonna pour a little out for Jane's.
Isabella?
For Isabella,
yeah. Isabella? Maybe, yeah, okay.
But I'm pouring a little out into my mouth because this beer is delicious.
Okay, all right. I'm going to start with a little bit of the I don't know, the feminist talk or whatever you want to call it from,
okay.
from the regular episode. You've got Emma who, at some point starts calling Edward daddy.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, and on the other side, you've got the redeemer is Jane, right? Because she solves this whole thing and whatever. Yeah. But then she's like, I totally plotted to have your baby without you knowing, which is another douchey woman thing that
like
that happens.
Condom cutter.
Yeah, that happens, but is not a cool thing, and I don't think it's an empowering, feminist ideal. So even the redeemed one, the one that has a backbone and kind of stands up to Edward, or does he break up with her? No, she breaks it off with him, right?
No, I thought he broke up with both of them. When he found out she was pregnant, he just left without saying anything more.
Yep. So even she has redemption as the stronger female character and being able to solve this mystery and basically take out Simon.
Still kind of like Daddy trapped him.
Yeah. Like
which is
and
not
was like,
cool.
I planned this the whole time. Like, I don't think I've ever heard the term condom cutter. I don't know if that's an actual term, but yeah,
I made that up.
That's okay, but it fits, right? And like I said, we've all known that person, right? Or known, maybe not in your own personal experience, but you knew that chick that did.
I could tell stories. I know. I have friends who, anyway.
So that's kind of what I was saying. Like, these are things that happen, but a woman of a certain type that speaks out against this type of fiction or whatever would be like, man, fuck this guy for writing this bullshit. But it happens. So who's on the bullshit? You know what I mean? Who's on the bullshit side of that?
Yeah. See, and yeah, there's times that women do some underhanded bullshit, and I think this is a sign that it was definitely a dude that wrote it, because like even the best woman in the book did some fucked up shit, which honestly comes really close to reality, because like everybody in the world has known, everybody regardless of their gender has done something that someone else would be like, whoa, that's fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I agree.
So I'm not saying that like if it was a woman who wrote this, they would just gloss over and do like like everything is perfect, but I think there is a lot of reality in how the characters were portrayed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
But still, that's a shitty thing to do.
Oh yeah. And then even like, so like I said, I was so sure a woman wrote this, and then I started having some doubts about this woman, but I remembered E.L. James wrote 50 Shades of Grey. And if you're going to look at what's probably considered to be the most sexist book of all time,
yeah,
that's probably it. It's written by a woman, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And then he's like, get rid of this baby. I'll give you another baby. And I was like, oh my God, like this can't be a guy writing this, because no guy in his right mind would, like, I was very confused as to who the fucking author was towards the end of this book. And by that, I mean, I still didn't know I didn't know it was a pseudonym. And even when I found out pseudonym, I didn't know who it was, but I was just the author's personal, I want to say their personal identity, but you know what I'm saying? Like, who the fuck is this person that wrote this book? Like,
the gender politics are kind of all over the map. For people who haven't read and just want to hear the spoilers because they don't care, at one point, Jane, who is pregnant with Edward's child, who you find out the gender is as a son, discovers that, and this is really like at the very end of the book, discovers that their son has Down syndrome. And so she's faced with, and I don't know if the statistic in the book is true, but 92% of people who discover that they're carrying a Down syndrome child have an abortion, which seems high, but kind of like, you know, I was talking to someone recently whose wife is pregnant, and that was a topic that came up. It was like they do tests for Down syndrome now, and if the kid is going to have Down syndrome, it's going to be an abortion. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, but I have no idea how I would feel, how I would act in that situation. But anyway, so in this, and this is where I think the character is kind of forcibly redeemed, because Jane is a little bit underhanded with that. Like, I got pregnant. Like, from the moment I met you, I knew I was going to have your baby, kind of like underhanded shit.
Mm-hmm.
She decides she's going to, once they find out that the kid has Down syndrome, she decides she's going to keep the kid anyway. And I think that's supposed to be a testament to her character and the fact that she's a good person. And then she kind of like is described as over, is being kind of above the standards that Edward puts out. But at the same time, I think that like she's someone who had a stillborn child, and what are the chances that she would give up any child, regardless of what, kind of disabilities or challenges that they might have, because it's better than losing the child, right? So I think that like bit of redemption that you're supposed to see at an end was so constructed that I don't really feel like any more empathy for the character because she chose to keep her Down syndrome child, because the other option is, well, now I'm killing the child on purpose.
Right. No, I agree with you. I was surprised. I was a little surprised at abortion. And she wasn't like leaning that way. I didn't feel she was. But yeah, I was surprised that came up at all. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
in her narrative where she's talking to, the journal entry or whatever it's supposed to be. Let's talk about journal entries. Major flaw in the book, right? Journal entries from a woman that's dead. I don't think we even mentioned that. As far as, I mean, we know she died because we talk about her death being investigated. But I guess in spoiler talk, we could talk about the fact that her journal includes like hearing the sound of her neck snapping, basically. I mean, so this isn't like I got to write all this down because I was in the hospital, or I wrote all this down and it ends, the day that she's killed, or because you could have gone that route too, where you didn't actually see through her eyes her own death, but that's what happens.
It's an impossible perspective. It is 100% an impossible perspective.
Yeah.
Which was fine because you only discover it's an impossible perspective in that last chapter where she's dead.
Yeah. And,
Although, I will say, so like you read the chapter from Emma's perspective in which she dies, but looking at the table of contents, you see that there's another chapter not long after that from her perspective. And you're like, what is that going to be? And it's entirely blank. And for some reason, that was really, really, really effective for me.
It was chilling.
Right. Chilling.
I knew all along that we shouldn't be reading her. You know what I mean? Like once that like we found out she was dead and stuff, I kind of got that feeling that like, how are we even reading this? I found I didn't care that the story was written in its little sing-songy back and forth way well enough that I didn't care that it was, as you put it well, an impossible perspective. Like I didn't, even when it happened. Reading her death through her own eyes, and I didn't know there was another chapter because I didn't see that. You know what I mean? When I flipped it was just a blank page. So I didn't see it coming in a table of contents like where I go, "What's that chapter going to be?" I flipped a page, and there it was. You know?
Right.
But yeah, very chilling to add that little nothingness in there. Great call on whoever's idea that was, if it was his or an editor. He thanks multiple people who helped him over a period of years figure out how to write this book. It's weird. Seeing her death was also really well written. Like talking about like basically hearing her bones break and stuff as she's going down the stairs is not something that I think I've ever seen, because you're right. That's not how you write stories, right? First person stories don't end after you draw your last breath. So I didn't care. So as we could poke holes in structure and logic and whatever, and I found myself just not caring about it. I thoroughly kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a minor thing. It's honestly a minor thing, and it was probably the fact that it was an impossible perspective, as I said, was actually probably redeeming for the fact that it was like a character perspective thing that I've been getting tired of recently. So, um, yeah, it was kind of cool, but definitely weird. So,
Well, it's different because whenever we read a book, or I could equate this to a TV show even. When you are the number one character in a TV show, when you are the first name that comes up on the screen in the list of actors at the beginning, you know that the danger level to that person is very low in insofar as
right.
death, because that's the show's about you. So if there's still episodes to come, you're safe. When you read a book that's a first person perspective, typically the character doesn't die. I'm not going to say it's impossible and that it hasn't happened, but because you're reading the story, you know you're going to get to the end of the story and they're not dead. So the danger level to them goes down in your mind a little bit. It would
Yeah.
be interesting to start seeing a slew of fiction where you really don't know if the character's dead or not because it's written first person and they end like Emma's story. I mean, it would get tired after the second or third one, I would imagine, but you get what I'm saying. It would raise the level a little bit in, is something really bad going to happen to this person that they don't make it through?
Mm-hmm. So can we talk about the end a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought the end was bullshit.
Okay. Now, when you're saying that, are you talking about the new tenant?
No, so I'm talking about the reveal of who killed Emma, and subsequently what happens with Jane and that particular killer.
Well, we
So
already decided
we're in,
Simon. So
yeah. So like yeah, but like I felt like it was kind of a cop out because like the whole allure of one Folgate Street for Emma, especially with like the break into the apartment, was how much of a fortress it was, and with a little bit of a sloppy narrative around the fact that Simon loved technology. Suddenly, he could hack into this technology that like literally exists nowhere else, and he never got rid of the code that he used to enter the house when he was living there. I just feel like it was very convenient to make him the killer and have him have the ability to hack into the system. I get it for him showing up having still have the code that he used when he was a tenant because it didn't happen long after he left. Fine. But like the fact that he can access the place when Jane lives there, that's sloppy as fuck.
yeah, I'm gonna agree with you in that, and they could have foreshadowed that a little better. Like, yeah, they mentioned he's really kind of into techie stuff, but he wrote for like a men's magazine.
Yeah, he worked for like Maxim or whatever. Like not
Yeah,
literally, but that's
right.
pretty
Yeah.
much what he did, yeah.
So you could have said that he was a computer software developer, or you know what I mean. You could have led a little more in, I mean, with like I
Yeah.
said, the foreshadowing, and maybe the big appeal to him was the technology, but you could have played that up, and then I could have seen it. But he's like, oh no. I hacked all those cameras. I was the one watching you. So it wasn't, like you said, just his entry into the building that was at issue. It's like, I've got a cell phone blocker. I mean, I know they
Yeah,
exist.
come on, dude.
I'm sure they exist. But yeah, I mean, it was like this perfectly cemented.
Like he goes from being like this mild mannered dude who like, likes home automation to the guy who like he's like the fucking head of Anonymous. And I'm like, where was this switch? Did it happen between when Emma died and when Jane was there? Did he just like fall in love with technology? Has he been actively trying to like figure out how to hack this house for like the last 3 years? It's never explained, so I have to assume that like he just walked in knowing he could hack the hell out of this place, and that's just really it just felt so sloppy.
Yeah, and the holes in that go further because he was doing those things to Emma. Dave, you remember Dave, the tech guy, Edward's partner,
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
the sloppy tech guy?
Dave Thiel or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, yeah, there were some problems with the technology. That's why we don't have video of what happened and stuff. So you would think they would have investigated.
Right. Yeah.
The
Especially with
Dave,
how like efficient the house is and how specific their needs are. Yeah.
but it's like they knew there was a hole in the system. They just never bothered plugging it, even though the guy who likely put the holes in the system is still around.
Yeah. So that was
Simon.
weak.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
some weak,
That was a
weak
little.
stuff.
Yep. I will give you that.
I think those are the broad strokes, but Carol the therapist was useless. I'm gonna tell you that right now. The detective was pretty useless.
Well, Carol was both Carol and the detective were plot Just
contrivances.
yeah, just yeah, so that you could get more information. I will tell you that it was the whole Emma lying about the break-in, about
Yeah.
saying she was raped, and then it turns out that she gave a dude a blowjob, but maybe she was like that twisted and turned so much. Not at the end of the book either. I mean, that's only like 70% of the way
Yeah.
in,
Yep.
and it was done so masterfully that I didn't even know who Emma fucking was for a while. Like I couldn't tell you
I agree.
which side of the fence was on. There were some really good things happening in this book, and I think my ultimate rating for it is going to be hard to come up with because I had some issue with some things, and the ending was weak, and maybe these women were a little weak and stuff. But ultimately, I kept turning pages, man. Like I wanted to know what happened, and really, that's the sign of a great book.
Dude, like, had the story been Emma, like, all the way through, being, like, the legit, like, person who was manipulating and making things crazy and messed up, and somehow she didn't die, but maybe Simon did, but it was all, like, this crazy thing, like, would have been a better story for me if Emma ended up being, like, overmatched for everybody else in the story, but, like, they killed her in such a simple and stupid way by some obsessed boyfriend that it was just like, come on, come on.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't know that I would like that better, but yeah, she was far smarter than Simon.
Yeah. All right. I think that's. Do you have anything else for our spoiler conversation?
Not that I can think of.
All right. You probably already listened to our wrap ups. So thanks for joining us. We're Spoiler Talk. Thanks for contributing on Patreon. And we'll catch you with our next review.